What's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining us here on our ESPN Esports VALORANT Show. Arda, Tyler, and Jacob with you. Emily is off for this week, and we got a lot to talk about as we wind down the Ignition series. So now, with the conclusion of the Pop Flash tournament, the Ignition series has effectively concluded. We don't have any more major tournaments on the horizon. Of course, Riot focusing attention on the League of Legends World Championship coming up very, very soon. But I know we're going to do a very special segment at the end of the show where we give out some Ignition Series awards. That's something you can look forward to. But gentlemen, when we look back on this inaugural esports series since the launch of the game, the Ignition Series, Tyler, starting with you, how do you look back on it, just overall?
I look back on it. I think we're going to look back on it pretty fondly. I think for North America, it was a huge success. I think we saw rising numbers throughout the Ignition Series tournaments. We saw teams like Sentinels become, brand names inside of the Valorant scene. Lots of new casters coming in. We saw a lot of different really good formats, from Pop Flash to FaZe Clan Invitational to PAX Arena. Just a lot of good stuff all around. I think we're also going to remember Japan and how Japan kind of made itself known. Japan wasn't a region many people were talking about at the start of Valorant. It was all about, South Korea or China, which of these two Asian regions is going to be the best of Asia? And then Japan comes out of nowhere and is like, we have more viewers than Korea. Yeah, it's us. We're the best. Like, look at us. We're Japan. Like, Japan's like, we're going to have more viewers than Korea and China combined for some of these events. We are going to have more pro teams than both of these nations. And Japan's really just embraced the game in a really awesome way. And I also think we're going to talk about the slow start of Europe, where NA has had a lot of viewership, and it's kind of just these growing rivalries where it's every tournament. It seems like there's a new beef happening, and there's memes, and there's storylines and narratives. In Europe, it's pretty much G2 just slapping everyone. It was just G2 slapping them there, Mixwell slapping them there, Artist slapping them there. It was just a lot of slapping with the G2 boys. And I think it's a thing of the viewership got a bit better by the end, and it's becoming more stable. And I think with FPX, Team Liquid, Big, NIP, potentially Rogue coming into the scene in the coming future, and we know Fnatic and Mad Lions and a few other European organizations, Vitality as well, are looking at the scene, seeing maybe early 2021 if they want to pick up a team, if Riot announces kind of what their plan is for the next year of Valorant Pro scene. I think Europe's going to be on the rise, but I also think it's very much NA did amazing, really strong start from NA. Japan was the big surprise, and Europe is very much a wait and see. It's not like Korea, where Korea does seem like it's going to need a lot of help to be a bigger region. But I do think Europe's going to be on the rise, and I think it's a waiting period for Europe. So all in all, really, really great idea by Riot. Lots of fun tournaments. I really enjoyed it. Now we kind of enter a mini shuffling period, which we will talk about very soon. Lots of teams gambling, a lot of orgs looking for some new members. It's going to be a spicy little mini off-season while World Championships going on in Shanghai for League of Legends.
Yeah, I feel generally that this will be a fun period for this game. Put into perspective, right? I think this would have looked a lot different if not for the pandemic. I'm not saying that every single event would have been a LAN. I'm not saying we would have an international big LAN like a IEM Katowice or ESL One Cologne that we normally get in Counter-Strike in a regular year. I don't think we'd have that level of tournament in Valorant quite yet. Regardless, pandemic or not. But I think in terms of launching a game in the middle of a pandemic actually is probably a good thing, because people are home more. So I think that a lot of people played generally just because they're not out with friends. They have more time to just sit around and be on the computer, right? So I'm sure player numbers are better because of the pandemic. But from an esports scene perspective, I actually think the pandemic hurts a lot. Not being able to host offline events, especially trying to get fans and seats and tell teams that people are legitimately interested in this more than just watching on Twitch, etc. And so, but I still think they did really, really well considering the circumstance, right? So I look at it and I was I think that it went really well. The scene it doesn't feel unhealthy. It doesn't feel like it's the next big thing quite yet, but it's a good start is how I'd phrase it.
We're going to talk about it a lot more near the end of the show. We're actually going to give our Ignition Series awards, for example, best tournament, best match, etc., etc. So stick around until the end of the show. That's when we'll address that. But Tyler mentioned it. we're sort of in this, let's just call it an off season for now, just for the purposes of what's happening with teams. We're already getting some big information as it pertains to teams looking a little different. We talked a lot about 100 Thieves on this show. Tyler and I interviewed Hiko and Nitro, and they basically said, we're going to take our sweet time in building this roster. Well, there might be 2 more players available for them to take a look at, as T1 has said goodbye today in a tweet to Crashies and Food. I didn't see this one coming, gentlemen. Didn't know where this exactly came from. I had heard that some teams knew about this because they were scrimming with T1. The wording is interesting here also, Jacob. I'll start with you on this one. The wording is interesting here, in particular what Crashy says. Thank you, T1, for the amazing opportunity. Very hard to step down, but felt like it was needed with the way the team was headed. Wishing everyone the best and thank you again. So the words there, step down, seem to imply that at least for Crashies, that's Crashy's tweet, that he made this decision himself. What do you think?
I think this team is in a rough spot more generally. They were the hot commodity at the very beginning of the Ignition series, at the very beginning of the scene. You know, they were like really dominant, but everybody caught up over these like past few months, right? Like, and everybody exceeded past them. This team always felt like an odd marriage in the sense that like AZK and Brax and Skadoodle, all I by Power guys, all really top Counter-Strike players in their own right? Incredibly respected, paired with these 2 guys who really never made it in Counter-Strike. Crashies and Food were good CS players, but they never really made it to an irrelevant stage of Counter-Strike in their careers. So bringing them into this team always felt like it was a little bit of like a Las Vegas wedding in a sense, but like to me, like, so I'm not terribly surprised by the news to answer that question. But at the end of the day, like I was not confident after probably 1 or 2 tournaments into this that like this was the right marriage for T1 on a roster.
So one half of this surprises me. So Crashies, I can give a little bit of info about. Before the most recent Pop Flash tournament, I had a few people come to me and tell me Crashies is out. They're like, Crashies is done. Crashies is leaving the team. He's stepping down. He's leaving. He's gone. And it went back and forth until I was told, oh yeah, he's playing for 1 more tournament. He's going to play in 1 more tournament. He's going to play with T1 for this last tournament and then reassess his options afterwards. And we saw this happen where, and I brought this up before, where right now we've seen Brax kind of become that lurker, play those anchor roles where at the start of Valorant, they tried to have him be that TenZ or Wardell type of entry star carry player where he's, entry fragging, getting all the kills. And it just didn't work. He wasn't looking as proficient and as comfortable as he really did on other agents like Omen, where he could do more of that lurking style, use more of his cerebral nature to kind of get ahead. And now we're seeing him play a lot more Killjoy, Cypher, which is also Crashy's main agent. So that wasn't really surprising to see Crashies leave. They tried him to play, the Phoenix and play him a more entry type of agents. It didn't really work out. I think he's one of the best Cypher players in North America. So if you're a team looking for a really strong anchor player, I would pick up Crashies immediately. Food was the one that surprised me, because all I've heard about Food from talking to various people, various pros in the scene who've played against him, is that he's a he's a special talent. He's a very special talent that when he's directed in the right way and he's in the zone, he's a 10s level type player where he can put up 30 kills per game. And we've seen this time and time again in the group stages of these Ignition Series tournaments, where if you look just like at the group stages of, the FaZe Invitational and the, Nerd Street Gamer Showdown and the PAX Arena Invitational, he is a monster. He's putting up regularly 25 kills a game. His ACS is over 300. First blood's out of the wazoo. And then when it comes to the playoffs, he's kind of shrunk a little. He hasn't been as good in the playoffs as you'd want to expect or to lean upon your ace player. So for Food, it was really surprising. And I do think it's because T1 is moving in more of veteran direction, Arda, and we have a bit of news on that. So there's a lot of shuffling going on. It's very, very exciting.
Before we get to that, the veteran direction that you alluded to there, how much of this decision do you think is that leaked DM moment on stream? How much do you think that factored in?
Man, it's so hard to say. Like, it's so difficult. Like, obviously that's something that comes up. Like, it's an awkward situation. Ska was getting benched regardless because T1 thought they were ending Nitro. That was the reason why Ska was benched. Ska wasn't benched because It wasn't because there was a lot of people going, oh, Ska, it's because of the awkwardness and the drama and people think of this and that. And I'm not saying that didn't add to the awkwardness and it didn't add to the drama of the team, but he was originally benched because they thought they were in Nitro and Nitro was going to step into that, what I would believe was the Jett operating role, or at least AZK would with Nitro shot calling. So he would be the one left outside the door with him, grinding the game to see if he can get back up to it and expand his agent pool. So I think it probably added to the awkwardness. There's no way it didn't, but I don't think that was the catalyst of why Skadoodle was benched. He was benched because they thought they got Nitro, and they were the leaders of the Nitro sweepstakes up until 100 Thieves dropped the golden bag.
So they weren't.
Yeah, until 100 Thieves was like, let's just open up some 100K, 200K, 300K. Let's just, why not? You're Nitro. You're a god. Let's go in. And for everyone who thought that 100 Thieves were just taking Valorant as like a small piece of their pie, they are the most aggressive team on the market by far. And love them or hate him or think he's like doesn't care about your game, Call of Duty, Valorant, League of Legends, whatever. Nadeshot is an aggressive, or his team around him are being very aggressive, and they really do see Valorant as a big piece of their future puzzle. Mm-hmm. And they've been in all these conversations. So
he's also been very blatant about how much he wants to win immediately.
He wants to win. Yeah, he wants to win. He's someone who wants to win. He thinks that Valorant is part of the 100 Thieves' future as an organization alongside League of Legends. We'll see if he dips his toe back in the Call of Duty League in the future. But for right now, let's kind of look at it, right? Where if you're investing in the Overwatch League or Call of Duty League or even LCS, you're spending 10 plus million minimum just to get into it. For Valorant, there's no access fee. So you can spend all the money you want on these rosters and buyouts and salaries. And you have the extra added, they paid a lot for Hiko, but Hiko's also a great content creator. So 100 Thieves is always thinking how they can build out their Valorant roster and how they can also just build their brand in general. So yeah, we'll talk about it a bit more, but 100 Thieves are very aggressive on the market, and Nadeshot isn't just words. He's really trying to build the best team possible.
I just want to make a point here about this T1 roster, expand a little bit of what I said. There seems to be, and I know Tyler knows a little bit about what's going on with T1 and on our Thieves too, to sort of add to this point. There seems to be a little bit of tribalism here in Valorant. We already saw it a little bit. I mean, there was a reason the players were so excited about our invitational earlier this year, because they want to be like, my game is better than your game. Counter-Strike better than Overwatch. Apex, you nerd, hits get no aim.
Nerd. Apex in particular.
Apex won. So
hit scan no aim. Fortnite kid lol. The regular thing, right? Like we've seen it. We've seen Twitch chat. Anyway, so there's a lot of pride, but I actually think that pride is a little bit more granular than maybe we think. In the sense that there definitely seems to be a little bit of tribalism among the CSGO veterans coming into Valorant versus the CSGO young guys. I say that in the case of the Hikos, the Nitros, Steels, who I interviewed earlier this week. And I know like Daze has said this and a few other people, Skadoodle, Brax, AZK, they all feel like they want to be together, and in a way, you're a little bit lesser if you're one of those Food, Crashies, Wardells. If you weren't ever at the top of Counter-Strike, you are not the same. And I think that tribalism is fueling the way that we're saying roster building in some of these teams. I think it will continue to fuel that. And so I think that's a huge point. I think that there is this really granular tick to this about people transitioning from one game to another and what their status was in the game before they got Valorant.
Okay, well, speaking of veteran CSGO players, Jacob had an interview with Steel, and that interview is currently available on our YouTube channel. Terrific interview. Please go check it out after the show. It is well worth your time. Very open and honest about his thoughts on CSGO and Valorant. But now let's go back to that point. Let's go back to the point of let's assume, Tyler, the hypothesis here that tribalism exists to the point where it's a old guard versus new faces sort of mentality that will now transfer to Valorant. There's one team then. If you're kind of looking at the landscape right now of Valorant, there's one team where Steel would fit in quite well.
There's
if you're looking at it that way.
There's two in tribalism, 100 T and T1. So let's get into it. Let's, Reddit competitive Valorant, the Valorant competitive section. Let's start flipping this. Let's get into the juice. Let's get into the real stuff we want to talk about, Arda.
Okay.
So let's look at T1. T1 is Braxton AZK. Those are their 2 players.
And Skadoodle.
And he's back. And let's get that out of the way. Skadoodle is back.
Skadoodle's back.
I brought this up before.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
From all sources, he's back. He's back in.
That was the shortest hiatus ever.
Well, and I said this. I've said this
like a month.
I've said this consistently on the show. Is that this isn't like a thing where he's just gonna stay on the bench and then leave, and T1 invested a lot in Skadoodle. This wasn't a type of player where they signed him on a flyer. See, this was another situation where 100 Thieves and T1 went to battle for a player trying to sign him, and T1 won this round. And they really believe in Skadoodle, and Braxton AZK obviously want to play with them. They're all friends. Skadoodle felt blessed that he would have the chance to play with 2 of his closest friends again after the whole iBuyPower debacle. Which leads us to the rumored 4th player that I've been hearing about being thrown around. So I've been hearing that the 4th player of this team, not signed yet, not been heard that he has been signed, but he's previously tried with the team, and it seems like he could be the 4th member, is Dazed, where obviously Jacob's probably going to be smiling at this. This is, another piece, another piece to the iBuyPower exodia, where we're building back the team, where, to Jacob's point, the tribalism. If you're AZK, Braxton, Skadoodle, who do you want to roll with? And Dazed is, he's gone full on to this game. He's been playing it and grinding for months now, where he's tried with other teams.
Don't take him as seriously because he's been I'm leaving Counter-Strike, and he'll come back 4 months later or 5 months later, right? Dude's definitely had some hurdles since being banned in terms of mental psyche and sticking with something. So I think people don't take him as seriously when he's I'm going into Valorant. Yeah. They're he'll go away in a few months. But I actually do think, to Tower's point, I think he'll end up on T1. I think that's right.
Yeah. So I do think he is being tested out, or he's being looked upon as the 4th member of the team. And then the 5th people, I think everyone, and I've seen this a lot, is everyone saying, oh, it's Steel. Steel has to be the 5th player. Do the Exodia. Get the Exodia. Get all 5 iBuyPower members.
I mean, what a story that would be, right? How cool of a story would that be if that happened?
It would be the coolest story in Valorant. How cool would that be if you summon Exodia? T1 is summoning the old #1 NA Counter-Strike team that was, cut off at the knees before they could actually run, right? This was the team that was supposed to be the first Counter-Strike major winners for North America. They were supposed to be the dream team, not Cloud9. Not Team Liquid either. But Arda, Jacob, we have to. It's a sweepstakes, and yes, from what I've heard, T1 has thrown in and talked to Steel. Steel is looking for a hefty amount, similar to
signed with Prod.
Signed with Prod. So is what they kind of are looking for, and we can argue all day who deserves more between Steel or Nitro. I think most people would say that Nitro obviously has the greater pedigree, but Steel is he's one of the few tier 1 players, a guy who just led a Chaos team who's on a run where the Chaos he's really. And I think the thing of Steel is he's shown that he can raise up young players and he can bring them up. Even when he's even when he's hamstrung, where he knows if he raises these kids up good enough, he's gonna have to get cut. That's impressive, right? How that's pretty honorable. Where it's
I mean, that was his job at Chaos. He literally built up this team to be a top 20 team, and then he's like, okay, if you guys qualify for a major, I have to get replaced because he can't play them, right?
So Steel, obviously, T1 would be amazing. It would be Exodia if they actually do sign Days, and it's not just a trial, and they sign him full time and sign Steel. You summon Exodia. You summon the greatest narrative you could possibly create. But it doesn't seem right now that T1 is in the lead for old Steel.
Ooh.
If I make an educated prediction, Steel will go to 100 Thieves.
Yep, and I think it's becoming a broken record. T1 versus 100 Thieves, T1 versus 100 Thieves, T1 versus 100 Thieves. They were in on Hiko, they were in on Ska, they were in on Nitro, they're in on Steel. If you're a fan of either of these two teams, you have to appreciate both brasses, really caring about their team enough, and they don't want to settle for 5th place, 4th place. They want to be champions. When the first World Championship comes along, both 100 Thieves and T1 think they're going to be the ones raising the trophy, and they're going to do anything in their power to do that. So T1 has inquired about Steel, as they should, and I don't believe he signed fully yet. I don't believe it's as close
Didn't
as
seem like it.
Not as close. It's not the Nitro situation where I was pretty much, they're in deep conversations, guys. They're in deep conversations, and then literally like 2 hours later, they're like, oh yeah, we had to put this video together before you broke it. So yeah, so 100 Thieves does seem to be most likely route for Mr. Steele. He has been scrimming with them in 10-mans. We've seen the screenshots of him playing Killjoy with Hiko and Nitro playing on Smurfs and them scrimming and getting the first trials out of the way.
Wait. Killjoy post-patch?
Pre-patch.
Oh, okay. Just checking. Who on earth plays Killjoy post-patch? Anyway, I'm just kidding.
So if I was a betting man, and I think if me and Jacob both had to bet, we would have to bet on 100 Thieves. Nate Shaw and the team have been very aggressive in the market, and I think if you're Hiko and Nitro and you're looking at the kind of surveying the Valorant scene, I think Steel is someone you point at and says, we can win a world title with this dude. Like, sure, people will be like, oh, there's 2 IGLs. How will that ever work? It's like, Nitro is an all-around great player.
Interesting you say that, though, because Steel, when I asked him specifically about this in the interview, I think we're going to show a clip in a little bit of it, and he verbatim said, I don't mind being an IGL. I don't have to be an IGL. So I think he would be willing to give that up in favor of Nitro. That is what Nitro feels strongly about.
So while it's not ending, it's not like the Nitro sweepstakes where by the time we had our Thursday show, it seemed all wrapped up for 100 Thieves. I do think there's still room for deals to be made. Hopefully, maybe, but it does seem like it's trending in the way of 100 Thieves Steel. And if it's so, just think of the first 100 T versus T1 matchup.
Oh, huge.
We have Sentinels. We have Sentinels versus TSM. Now you have like this other heated rivalry where it's all of iBuy powered plus their fifth, whoever that might end up being, versus Steel, Hiko,
ex-teammate,
Steel, Hiko, and Nitro. Like that's.
I like the genesis of both of those rivalries. Yeah. TSM and Sentinels don't like each other, but they bring the best out of each other. Oh. But then you have T1 and 100 Thieves where they've been battling for players. Like, I love how that's such a springboard for a natural rivalry. It's great. We need more of that.
Yeah, so they have incredibly prideful executives in Joe Marsh and Nate Shaw too, which is the funny part. Like the icing on the frickin' cake, both those guys want to be top dog in this industry.
Joe Marsh is at a disadvantage because he's a Flyers fan, but I digress. Let's get to the interview actually that Jacob did with Steel, which is available at youtube.com/ESPN Esports. Let's get to a clip right now.
So I guess what I want to ask about that is, why now? Why didn't you make this decision a few months ago?
I think that the main thing was that even though I had limitations in Counter-Strike, obviously it's just like the 2 majors a year and then some odd RMR events. For the most part, I knew where I was in Counter-Strike. I knew what I was capable of. I knew the scene. I knew that it wasn't like super changing all that much. And I knew kind of like where I could compete, what level I could compete at. With Valorant, there's a lot of question marks. When I was actually approached earlier, like a few months ago, by an org that wanted to bring me into Valorant, but the offer was kind of not enticing. It was like less salary than I was making in Counter-Strike, for example. But beyond that, there's a bunch of question marks. Will I be good at it? Will I like the game? What's going to happen with the scene? Like, is it going to develop into something really big? So for me to switch at that point in time when the game first came out would be very risky for me because I wouldn't know what to expect. And I feel like I hadn't really done what I set out to do with Chaos like I had with Ghost. So back then it didn't really make much sense, but now that I'm getting the team to a level where it's like we're top 20 in the world in CS and I can be happy with that and I can kind of pass them off like, okay, you guys are in like a pretty good situation that you're nestled in at the moment, top 20, you're in EPL, you're going to get invites to other tournaments. There's another player available that you can get now. let's make this transition as seamless as possible. If, they weren't able to get a player now, I'd still be playing CS with them for a little bit while also kind of weighing up the offers for Valorant. But because of the timing of the replacement, that's why I'm currently on the bench instead of playing out these last remaining matches with them.
From a role perspective, right? You were quite famous in CS for being an in-game leader. You're a vocal dude, a thoughtful dude, clearly, here speaking today. But you think that's the role that you want in Valorant too, is really sort of being able to control things on the map?
It's not a necessity. So when I started doing in-game leading in Counter-Strike, it was actually pretty early on when I was playing Counter-Strike Source that like the teams I've been playing with kind of on an amateur level, playing with a bunch of local dudes, we needed one, so I became it. But as I played with other teams, I had been not the in-game leader. So when I was playing on Cypher Rev with like Daze and Frost and TCK and stuff, Daze was the in-game leader. And then when I moved to, I'm mixing up the timelines here, but like when I played before that, because that was after I was playing with Dynamic. Dynamic AZK was the caller. On my earlier Cyber Rev rosters, Schaefer was the caller. So it's not like I was always the in-game leader. On MTW, Nookie was the caller. On Dignitas, though, I was the caller. So, and then on I Power, like Daze was the caller sometimes. I was the caller sometimes. So I wasn't always an in-game leader in Counter-Strike. I had taken up that role when it was necessary, but I have switched between being a primary opper, in-game leader, kind of a playmaker, like first entry fragger guy, and also more recently on Chaos, especially like site anchor and lurker on CTNT. So I've pretty much done every role in the game, including in-game leader, but I don't think it's something that I need to do.
All right, the full interview is available at youtube.com/ESPN Esports. Definitely worth checking it out. Do so after the program. Checking out chat, a lot of you are asking questions. Oshrai in particular said, can you address how some of the pro players are involved in a match-fixing scandal in CSGO? This stems from a video that has surfaced online. Tyler, what do we know about this?
What we know is that it's the MDL, which is the Mountain Dew League, kind of the academy or secondary league of Counter-Strike Global Offensive. As we all know, a lot of those MDL players, those tier 2 players in North America, moved over to Valorant, and a lot of them have done quite well, finding themselves on teams with pretty nice monthly salaries. And while I think we're still far away from actually naming names, and I would not name anyone because it's silly, and we need to far more.
And also just context around that.
Yeah.
Sorry, like context around that. Given what's actually happening with coaches right now, particularly Hunden, Dead, etc., a lot of people are going to be witch hunting in Counter-Strike right now. So I would say take everything you hear with a grain of salt. What was said was that the Esports Integrity Coalition, which is a part of our Esports Integrity Commission, which is partners with ESL and DreamHack, have 15 open investigations into various different players around Counter-Strike. Several of them which are expected to be for match fixing in the Mountain Dew League. That is the expectation. Yes. So, but there are, because of what happened with Dead, the MIBR coach, and Hunden, the heroic coach, lots of people are witch hunting right now in Counter-Strike for cheaters and match fixers. So I would say take everything with a grain of salt until you actually hear about it from a reliable source.
I can say that I've had some pros in the Valorant scene. I've reached out to me. I've reached out to them asking, do you think there are pros in the current Valorant scene who are doing well in North America who could be caught up in this match fixing scandal? And I have heard back from these people pretty much saying, yes, 100%. They are people who are going to be, if this is found out to be true, and if there was match fixing to be had in those investigations, some NA teams are going to have a very difficult situation on their hands, right, Jacob? Where it's a thing of what happens, because it's not Counter-Strike. Valve can ban them all they want. Valve can just kick them out the door and be like, you're never going to a major again. But it leads it's all to these, tier 1 organizations, right? Where for clarity's sake, it's no one from T1, obviously. But for T1, 2 of their players, maybe 3 if they sign Dazed, are banned for match fixing. What happens when you have a situation where you see players who possibly or could be condemned to be match fixing in another game? Do you just outright kick them? Are they banned right away? Do you give them a second chance and say, it might have been 6 months ago or a year ago, but, it's a different game.
That's where it gets really complex, right? In the sense that it gets really complex because with AZK, Brex, Steel, and Dazed, right? The four guys who got banned from the iBuy Power team, people may remember Skadoodle never claimed the money or the skin, so he never got banned. With those guys, it's really easy to say, oh, well, they did it 5 years ago, right? Like the actual match that they match fixed in was almost 6 years ago. The scandal was 5.5 years ago, early 2015, but the match itself was August of 2014, so 6 years ago. You can make the argument these guys learned from their financial upside went out the window, their competitive dreams went out the window, they had to find other opportunities or other hobbies, they had to sort of sit in this purgatory for 5 years until Valorant came around to find themselves something else, a different thing in our space to do. That argument gets a lot harder if someone did it 6 months ago, right? Like it's a whole different thing.
It's worms.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's the idea that we feel at least as though the iBuy Power component that are in Valorant
right?
have paid their due.
And they
have atoned for their sins, so to speak, have been in that jail, so to speak, and served their time. And now they're able to have a second life. Whereas if we found out about it today that someone in Valorant was match fixing in CS:GO, the thing is that optically the perception is they have not served their time. We just found out about it, so optically it looks a little different than someone who has been sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the reactions from CS:GO analysts, I think something Thornton said actually resonated with me, whereas he said Steel has done far more for the North American scene to make up for what he did in the past iBuy Power.
Yeah,
and that's true. He has led and he's grown and he's kind of taken on this stewardship of he's led these young players up and he's really taught a lot of these young players how to play Counter-Strike. And he did it knowing that if he got it, to lead these guys to glory meant his failure in the end, where he would have to get cut, where he would not be able to take those final steps towards majors. So Steel and Brax and AZK, all these players have atoned to some point, and they've all had. I interviewed Brax at length about this for a feature I wrote for ESPN, and for 2 years straight, he was in purgatory, where he woke up every single day. He went to go stream Counter-Strike, and in the back of his mind, he was thinking, please let this be the day. Please let this be the day. Please let this be the day I get unbanned. Because that's all he dreamed about was he wanted to play Counter-Strike for a living, not as a streamer, but as a pro player. And 5 years later, 6 years later, we can say, yes, they've learned their lesson. They deserve a second chance at least in another game. And I think most people would say they deserve a second chance in Counter-Strike. But if this is something, if it comes out you did this 6 months ago, what's your defense? It's I've changed a lot in 6 months. Since I moved to Valorant, a much more safe, cleaner, not so much toxic scene as Counter-Strike. I've learned to be an upstanding citizen. That's not going to fly.
No. Well, we will have more information as we understand it. Of course, remember, Jacob also covers Counter-Strike for us here at ESPN Esports. He has a column at espn.com/esports, the Eco as well program, and like I said, the interview with Steel that you can find on YouTube. Speaking of second chances, gentlemen, how about Breach? Let's talk about these patch notes. Don't call it a comeback. He's been here for years. Breach has now gone, at least in North America, from being a virtually unpicked agent to now being the best counter to the most powerful combination in Valorant, and I'm talking about the Jett op. Patch 1.07 includes a lot more than that. Of course, now we're talking about Sage's nerfs and how virtually this agent will become perhaps unplayable.
Those weren't nerfs, Arda. That was a death sentence. They killed my girls.
Those weren't Nerf guns they were using there. No. I see what you're saying.
I have not been playing a lot of games in a few weeks because we've just been kind of inundated with a bunch of work, like ramping up for Worlds, etc. But I do not play Sage anymore, and you guys will remember how adamant I was. I play Omen and Cypher now. That is my life. That character is put 12 feet under the ground, not just 2 feet under the ground. So yeah.
So
dead character. No worth.
Man, remember a lifetime ago when Sage was an insta lock?
Yep.
Man. Has there been one? Actually, let's think about this. Has there been one character that has literally gone from insta-lock to insta-ban, not ban, but like
Garbage?
never used? Yeah, from 100% usage to 0%. Sage
that
has
is-
to be the first, right?
That happens in League of Legends all the time, though. League of Legends, they're tweaking.
Well, in Valorant.
Oh, in Valorant, no. In Valorant so far, this is the first like hero to zero, and then you have Cypher over here. They're just chilling. The Cypher mains with their silly little cameras, their nerd cams, their tripwires, their 95% pro play rate, almost 100% of the teams playing Cypher. It's almost a designated position. No nerfs, no nothing. Cypher's just chilling in the corner, while Sage, who was already falling out of the pro meta, basically got her arm cut off, her left arm cut off, her knees cut off. She's not a playable character anymore. And I do agree, like, and this wasn't towards pro play, right? This was towards general. This is for the plebs, right? Where Sage is, for plebs, a overpowered character, because the amount of power you get from that one heal or the self heal is incredible, because in a pro match you don't get a lot of time to think. You are getting headshot immediately. You don't usually get many chances to heal yourself with the headshots and the accuracy and all that. But people in lower ranks don't know how to shoot, Arda. They don't know how to shoot, Jacob. They're shooting at the knees. And when you get shot at the knees, oh no, heal. You don't, if you do that against a pro player, you just get shot in the head and Sage is dead.
Unless you're Jacob, where you're Sage lurking and there's no heal around you, and you're just like, I need a heal. Where's my Sage? Where's my Sage? On the other side of the map. What?
This is why Omen is a better fit for me, because I literally can just like show up behind people and be like, hello.
For those curious, by the way, at Pop Flash, which is the most recent North American tournament, Sage had an overall 38% pick rate, where to Tyler's point, 99% for Cypher and 87% for Omen. So those are the top two. But yeah, 38%.
The thing I liked about Sage, though, and I think a lot of pros agree with this, is that she didn't need to get touched, is that she was in a very interesting place where you could either have played her very, very safe, play a very safe Sage, which we were seeing a lot less of, or you had the David P's, and especially the Sick of the world and Mitch's, where they were playing the battle stage, where they were using that self-heal, where they were playing aggro, where they were playing up in front. And now she's just such a useless character where you can't even get a full heal off. It takes 10 seconds to self-heal for 60 hit points. Oh, and your wall, your res wall that you always throw down instantly to make sure you can res someone, that doesn't matter, because now it takes, 3 seconds to fortify. So you could just knock down that wall instantly if you're waiting for a Sage res. So yeah, she's a dead character. They gutted her. They chopped her at the knees. There really is no point of playing Raze. She needs buffs. Like, now we're in this weird position where the most overpowered character in the game now needs buffs to even be relevant, because I don't see her being played at all in pro play anymore. She doesn't serve any use. So we're most likely going to see Cypher continue to be that anchor, and we're going to see 4. And I think Killjoy, too. If we can get to Killjoy, I think Killjoy also had a big nerf this patch.
Yeah, talk about the Nano Swarm. What else was buffed for Killjoy?
God, she was so annoying.
The Nano Swarm and the turret. Well, the turret was actually a bug, right? Like, Sova's Recon Bolt could identify the turret, but the Nano Swarm was I think that was one of the things that the pro players mentioned the most, and the ones that I talked to, they were like, the Nano Swarm is ridiculous. Like, it has to be nerfed.
I think people are just realizing that Killjoy is kind of awkward and goofy on attack, and that she really only is good in post-plan situations and great on defense. And now you're taking away some of her, what even made her relevant in the first place, which was her overpowered Nano Swarm. Her turret's useless. Her alarm bar's fine. But now that, like, oh, hey, the Nano Swarm is very obviously seen. It can't be really hidden or a trick anymore. You can't really trick people into stepping on it. It gives you a longer wind-up time now before it kills you or even tickles you now, because they've turned down the damage, I believe, about 20 or 40%. So Killjoy, again, I think she'll still see more play than Sage, just because I think her ult is still really, really good, and I think some pro teams can play really well around that ultimate. So I can still see maybe teams like C9 who've seen success with Killjoy keep playing her, but Killjoy wasn't an overpowered new character to begin with, which is kind of strange, because usually in League of Legends, when a new character comes out, they're almost always meta. It's always like, oh my god, Aphelios has 500 different things, like he's so overpowered, 200 years.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, Yone's, like, they're not even letting Yone into freaking Worlds, because he would have been perm banned too. Like, in Valorant so far, we've had Reyna, who came in, and people were like, okay, she's kind of bad. We're not going to really use her. And now she's kind of used in certain situations with high-end fraggers like Scream and Tens are playing her, no one else is. And now we have Killjoy, who was being played by Mitch and a few other players, but not an overpowered pick. So it's a weird kind of switch from League of Legends, where in League of Legends, every new character is overpowered. Let's see them pro play. Let's get those people buying those characters. Where in Valorant so far, it seems like a lot of the new characters are kind of they have uses. They're useful in some compositions, but they're not overpowered at all, and they don't seem like staple. I don't see Killjoy or Reyna being staples in any meta in the coming future.
A couple more things about the patch. Jacob, nerfs to the shotguns, buffs for the Vandal. So that was a deliberate attempt to make the Vandal competitive compared to the Phantom. What do you make of those weapon buffs and nerfs?
I actually like it a lot because in me playing like the past few weeks in my spare time now that I'm getting a little bit of it, it's the Vandal felt good if you were good at like hitting headshots. Felt awful if you wanted to spray even in the slightest bit, right? Like it was a gun that felt, depending on your skill as a player, it felt like it was useless, right? For me, I still like preferred it over the Phantom for a period of time because I tried to aim high and hit the head every single time somebody pops a corner. But the Phantom was the better gun, for sure. The Phantom has been the better gun for like at least a month now, I feel like, since they made some changes to the Vandal, I think like a month and a half ago in the patch or whatever it was. Timeline is all over the place in my head. But anyway, I mean, like this is a very minor buff to the Vandal, but it feels like a needed buff to the Vandal because it did feel like it was a little bit behind the Phantom. Nerfs to the shotguns, good riddance. Those guns are incredibly annoying. The fact that like the big one is the tagging. I'm reading the notes right now again. Like the big one is the tagging tune for targets beyond 10 meters. The fact that they like changed what a shotgun can do at distance is really important, and the slow. They changed the slow too. So yeah, like I like all of the shotgun changes. The fact that you could get hit from a significant distance by like a Jett with a shotgun that falls in your face, but she's far enough away, right, that it shouldn't necessarily do everything, that felt kind of bad. And the slow in Valorant's always felt a little off, but in that particular instance, it felt particularly annoying. So I'm glad the shotguns are getting a nerf.
So we'll talk about Viper and Breach in a second.
Breach.
I just want to give a funny anecdote about Sova. So a minor thing about Sova is they updated the physics on Sova's cape so that it should wiggle outside his hitbox less frequently. So I did a whole pros react piece at ESPN.com/esports. I just asked a bunch of pros what they thought of the patch. So I sent a message to Psalm, and his response literally was, "Sova can jiggle." That was his takeaway from the patch.
A man of many words.
I'm like, you know what? I can always count on you for entertainment, Psalm. So appreciate that very much. Viper, I can't believe I'm asking this, Tyler, but will Viper become viable?
I think she was very similar to Reyna and even Killjoy in the sense of she's never been since her recent buffs in recent times. She has been more viable. I think with her new buffs, especially with her wall, being able to set it up pre-round, which means that you can plant the wall and run away and set up in a different direction, is brilliant. I really like that direction. It makes her feel special, and it really does keen on her trying to cut up the map. That's kind of her specialty, right? Where Brimstone and Omen are more about the smokes, having those smokes be in the core of their kits, where Viper is much more about cutting off areas where you're splitting the map. You're splitting it directly. There's no dome. Oh, her ult is a dome. And they've made that better too with the Viper's pit now not decaying any of your allies. I think it's a big buff for her, actually. I think her being able to pre-round her wall is awesome and gives her a lot more strategic ability. You can now play a lot more around her wall, where before it's like, oh, hey, her wall's up. That must mean she was on A. Like, she was there at the start of the round. Now you can play around that a lot more, do some fakes with it. I just think it gives her a lot more strategic depth. And I do think her ult now, that you can now have your teammates be in the pit with you. They don't take any damage. That makes it a lot better post-play. And I think while I don't think she's going to raise right to the top of the statistics, she's not going to be Cypher or even maybe Breach now or Jett with how needed she is into a comp, I do think we're going to see a lot more Viper signature picks. I think on certain maps and certain situations of certain players, I think Viper now serves kind of a certain use, and I like that. There should be agents in the game that aren't, always meta, but I think in certain situations you can make a Viper very, very dangerous. So
yeah, I love the change to the Jello, the ult, not affecting your teammates anymore. That is awesome. That is like such a positional advantage. The fact that now your teammates have such a big edge, right? If you because there are some instances where you just need to stick in it, right? Like if it puts it up and you're in a 2v1 situation, but you have some player. Let me just write something out for you. Say you're in a 3v1 or 3v2, and one of the players on the other team knocks you down, right? And there's two of you left, and you're in a position where you have to play within that ult. To punish yourself really bad, or to punish your own teammate with the decay felt really bad. I love that is gone now, because I think it gives you such a significant advantage for an ult. That's what an ult is supposed to be. An ult is supposed to give you a positional advantage. So that's and that's why
exactly.
It's why it only comes up every so frequently, right? Or based off your kills. Having an ult is supposed to give you an edge, and you're supposed to learn how to play around it. So I like that change in particular more than anything. I think that will feel good for Viper players a lot.
Last thing, quick thoughts on the breach. That was the biggest one. Yeah,
he's Batman now. He's Batman. I said he's the Batman, the Jett's Joker. Where now we have all these Jetts in North America. Opping. You have some smokes, you have some flashes. Now you have breach coming in. Not only the 3 flashes, but now he has the D-scope with this concussion, which is awesome. Where if you hit a Jett who is opping at the time, it D-scopes them and they can't re-scope while they're still concussed, which is great. And I do see some of the points from some pros where it's you shouldn't have one character needed to counter another character, right? You should have more than one option to really beat down the Jett, which is just nerfing Jett in general, right? You should just nerf Jett. You should nerf her ult. You should make her less of an eco killer where you can just play around eco rounds with her ult and steal runs that way, and you should make her ult a bit worse, and you should not make her tailwind so powerful it's operating. But I'm interested in it. I'm fine with this. We're kind of in a lull period, right? Where the next month, 2-3 months, we're gonna have less.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out, and I'm kind of interested to see how this Batman breach works. Are we now going to have a designated breach on every team with a designated Jett? That seems really fun. Now we have, I saw today that DVP was hey, my Sage got killed, so my Sage is dead. Maybe I'll come up breach main. And he's been grinding breach, so you might see breach players become a designated staple of the team to fight off the oppers, which I don't know for the long haul if that's a good idea, but I think for the short term it could be an interesting experiment.
I like these changes. Counter-Strike's not a good one-to-one. Overwatch is more of a better comparison about metas and characters and abilities. But I mean, in any shooter that has characters, Overwatch, Team Fortress 2, whatever it may be, where they have their unique skill sets. I think there are characters that counter others, and I'm glad that Jett has a counter of some form. So yeah, I'm with Tyler. I don't know if I like this permanently, but for the short term, I like it. It's a good change.
2 quick news items before we get to our awards to round up the show. Japan has experimented in at least one of their tournaments, the AW Extreme Masters Tournament, with agent bans. We talked about this a long time ago when, essentially, I believe it was the day before the global release in early June, about how this would become a thing when enough agents exist. And certainly maybe it might be a little too early right now, but our good friend manager of A's Infamous did ask for thoughts on the ban system that W Extreme Master was using. Couple thoughts here. The talent scout for Valorant for Complexity, Mirko, said, I like it, maybe a little too early to do bans, but I do think once there are more characters, it should be implemented. And Elevate, who's loaned to East Coast from 100 Thieves, I love this, been wanting it for a while. It's pre-skill gap and makes the game not just bedazzled CSGO. Are the 2 big comments from that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the more the roster expands, bans will become more regular. It'll be an additional part of strategy that you have to take in, more understanding your opponent, not just being better than them on the map. Yeah, I like it. I don't know if now is the time to do it, but I like the idea generally.
I enjoy it. Just like I said with the previous talk of Breach versus Jett, right, where it's you're testing something out. We're in an experiment stage of Valorant. We are not even close to our first world championship. Like, if we should experiment with so many different rule sets and formats and everything before we get into our first real world season. Like, let's say Worlds next year is midsummer, maybe like end of 2021. Like, we were have our first like international Worlds competition, whatever Riot decides to name it. We should be experimenting, throwing everything at the wall to see if it works. And if the agent ban works, and it's actually something that teams like, and it promotes diversity in compositions, and it's just really fun and exciting for not only the strategic minds of the teams and players, but just overall. I just think we should try it. Throw everything at the wall. It might fail, but that's fine. We're in this weird period where we're allowed to like experiment and fail. There's been a lot of really failed formats so far in the Ignition series, which is fine. It's okay that some of these formats suck because now we've learned what's good. And we'll talk about that in a few seconds when we talk about the Ignition series awards and which tournament formats worked. A lot of them didn't work out, but that's fine because now we know which tournament formats do work in future of Valorant. If BO3 versus BO5, our single game elimination is fine. Like, we're starting to learn things out, so throw everything at the wall, and we're going to figure it out by the time the first Worlds come.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, Tyler. 100%.
Yeah.
The game was released in June, people. It was beta before that. Have some patience. Seriously. Pop Flash. Let's give just one big takeaway. Everybody knows the results by now. Everyone knows what happened at the tournament. Sentinels reigning supreme. But in terms of, it could be anything. It could be a team. It could be something you noticed. It could be a match. One big takeaway from that tournament. Jacob, let's start with you.
Yeah, MB. I love it. I'm not surprised by the winner of Sentinels, but I am really happy to see a team that's investing in development start to build like this. MB Immortals and Digi, I would lump them all together in terms of developing talent that maybe is not as recognized. I like seeing that rather than just all the star teams. I was very happy to see MB performance.
Tyler.
I told you this on the co-cast, the co-stream we did for the Pop Flash tournament. Sinatra gets better every single tournament, and that's dang scary. It's really, really scary. Each tournament, he's only getting better, and the sky's the limit for him. He is a natural. Yep. There's no player better with him in ability. We're going to talk about Sinatra soon for our award season with the Ignition series. He just gets dang better every single series, and that's scary for the rest of the team because some of these players have hit their ceiling already in terms of just mechanical skill and their headshot accuracy and how they go from CS to Valorant. Sinatra is still learning how to play a Counter-Strike game. And when he puts it all together, man, that's scary. Yeah. It's just scary.
Speaking of headshots, actually, you mentioned this on Twitter, and I completely agree. Envy, it just feel like they just get headshots with ease. They turn a corner, and their crosshairs are already there.
CS
It's very impressive.
That's the years of CS. That's why they're such a densely CS roster, right? With FNS and Calypso, like those guys have been grinding CS for a long time. Their headshots and just their pure Counter-Strike mechanics are always on point. Super impressive. Every game they have at least one like mind-blowing sequence where one of them popping up.
So very quick hits here for me. Number one, I thought the production values were great. Shoulder content was excellent. I really feel like if nothing else, and there were certainly some positives to this tournament, Pop Flash really set the bar for what production should look like for future Valorant tournament. Everything looked really good. The talent was great. The content was great. So good job, Monty and crew. Did a fantastic job with the Flashpoint Invitational. I don't think Sabrosa deserves as much of the flack that he received. I know that it was a botched play at the end. I'm sure he feels bad about it. I saw the Kevin Love, LeBron James meme. We all saw it. Totally get it. Doesn't deserve that much flack because he did play very well in parts of this tournament. I don't think one play should define him. I think that we move on from it very quickly. And I think that TSM have a lot of work to do in terms of, how to defeat their Kryptonite Dignitas in the future, but also what to do here because this is not a result they want. But that doesn't fall solely on Sabrosa, is what I'm trying to say here. So let's not drag him through the mud just because of one misplay thinking that all the agents were dead.
In-game leading as an entry is insane. The only other player I know who does that is Command of Genji. Having an entry while also trying to make the shot calls you're juggling like 12 knives at the same time. It's very difficult to keep them all in the air.
So that tied a bow on the entire Ignition series. So in NA, why don't we hand out some awards? Just imagine us in bow ties and tuxedos, and now we're going to give out some awards here. We got 4 awards to give out, and actually, for many of these, spoiler alert, we actually agreed a lot. So there were definitely some easy choices. In some categories. Let's start with best tournament. We're just going to show you on screen what our selections were because, like I said, we did match up in a lot of these. But best tournament, I had the FaZe Clan Invitational. I think we all had them.
FaZe was the best games, and for storylines, and he had Coach Myth's debut, where Coach Myth kind of came. That was his debut, peaking at 60,000 viewers. You had the TSM versus Sentinels, just match of these two teams trash talking and just BMing them. This was a 3-day straight of just them fighting and squabbling. It all culminated in the perfect best of 5 final where they went all 5 matches. So in terms of just content, in terms of game content and just rivalries and storylines and viewership, FaZe Clan was the best, and maybe even format as well. I will give Pop Flash the peg when it comes to production. They had the best production of any tournaments, but FaZe had so much more going for it. Just teams, more games, more storylines, more viewership overall. It has to go to FaZe.
Absolutely. And they and set the record, right, in the Ignition series for top viewership, for peak viewership, including streams.
Yep, 180K plus, which
Amazing.
is by far the best. So yeah, congratulations to FaZe. They did a really they had some invite teams, they had some qualifying teams. It was a tournament structure that made sense. It good double elimination bracket. They had great storylines. TSM Sentinels being the final. Just everything went right for FaZe Clan in that tournament. It was just a really awesome tournament to watch.
And it also, according to us, I think, Jacob, you agree as well, had the best match of the Ignition series. Yep. So why don't we just go right into that as well? Because the storyline that was the most spicy throughout this entire series really had one of its showpiece matchups, Jacob, in this grand final.
TSM versus Sentinels. That's the for me, I mean, it was the epitome of rivalry. I think that it's not like what we hope to see between T1 and 100 Thieves, where it just seems like match made perfect. This just developed because these players dislike each other. They're a bunch of trash talkers. They're incredibly egotistical. I think a lot of people. This rivalry would not exist if Sinatra in particular is not as good as he is. I think that his skill, him being as good as he is, kind of made him put a target on his back for a lot of people. Same way it has for Tins, but Cloud9's been a little bit more inconsistent. Sentinels has been the better team, better than Cloud9. And so I think Sinatra arrogantly kind of walks around with a little bit of a target's back. And yeah, I mean, some of the CS guys, back to our point about tribalism era, some of the CS guys beat up this Overwatch, former Overwatch League MVP, and they want to show him who's boss, and he stuck it to him a few different times, including pretty recently. So yeah, this final was fantastic. The culmination of everything around social media felt great. Yeah. To me, this was my favorite match of the Ignition for sure.
Agreed. I mean, you could say either the upper bracket final, which had the marathon match on Hayden versus Sinatra, tried to LeBron James his way to the victory of just on Sova, just grinding, had 30-plus kills, tried to grind his team to the victory. They lost. Then the finals itself for TSM won again. You have the trash talk of Hayes saying he had to take these kids out to spank him a bit. You have, I just love the rivalry. I love it. I love how, Drone and Taylor saying Zombs can't read. I love how Zom says, I want to fight these kids at the first LAN. These guys are – the first Valorant LAN is going to be so much fun. And you think of Sentinels, TSM, 100 Thieves, and T1 with maybe the iBuy Power Crew rolling of T1 jerseys, and you see Steel with 100 Thieves hat on. I hate COVID so much. It sucks so much. The first NA LAN or the first international LAN can have all these teams together. It's going to be a bloodbath. There's going to be so much good. It'll be so much beef. But
yeah.
But I think the thing that Drone and Taylor told us, even when they were trash Sentinels, is that they bring the best out of us. The one thing we say good about them, the one thing that we compliment them all is they're damn good. And they push them to be better. And that is something that you want in every great rivalry. You hate your rival, but they push you to be better. And that was the summarization of that final of the Flash Clan Division, which was the best Valorant match bar none. Doesn't matter what region. That is the marquee match so far in Valorant.
And looking back on that, Sentinels, I mean, TSM had the map advantage.
Yep.
That's a whole other conversation we're not going to get to right now. But Sentinels won their matches pretty convincingly, 13-8 on Haven, 13-7 on Ascent. TSM labored over their victories, right? 13-11 on Split, overtime need for Bind to secure the victory. Yes, they got the win, but that's when we really started to think, you know what? Sentinels might have something here. Like, this is where we truly believed it cemented the rivalry. And we're like, oh, man, okay, give me 100 more of these tomorrow, you know? It was great. Okay, let's move on to best team. I think that this one is unanimous too.
That's easy.
I think it's easy to say Sentinels simply because of their dominance. Some people might claim recency bias, and I would only say agreed if TSM had a longer dominant streak. Like if T1 didn't have that initial top of the power rankings at like the very beginning. And if it was TSM instead, then you could argue the debate like first half, second half, but it definitely has to be Sentinels.
It comes down. Yeah, it comes down. I mean, the thing it comes down to, if we're talking about best North American team to this point, you can bring up the other tournaments that TSM have ended in, right? TSM has a lot of third-party tournaments they've won. The Pittsburgh Gauntlet Series, Pulse Invitationals, stuff like that. But if we're talking about just lone Ignition Series tournaments, the 4 grand, big major NA tournaments we've had so far, Sentinels have made 3 finals. They've won 2. They won the most recent. They dominated the most recent one. They blew out Envy in the final. They only dropped 1 map on their way of just destroying everyone in their path. Like, it has to be Sentinels. From 1 to 5, they are the most gifted team in North America when it comes from 1 to 5. It doesn't matter what game it is. You can either have Stick at top of the boards, Dapper at top of the boards. They have just firepower at every single position. And Zoms, I just want to give out to Zoms because Zoms was the weak link. I thought when we first started, Zoms looked like that player who was going to keep the turn. He was going to hold everyone back. He's Sinatra's best friend. He's this Apex kid. Bit of an ego on him a bit. Like, people were mad at him. Like, obviously Hayes was like, I don't respect this kid. Why does he have this personality when he's proven nothing in an actual tactical shooter? And Zom has grinded this game where Zom has gone from being a player that, at the beginning of the Sentinels run, kind of was holding the team back to now being, you can't have a championship team on Sentinels without Zoms. He is so good and he's so clutch. Like, I just want to give a shout out to Zoms because we know Sinatra and how great Sinatra is, and rightfully so. He is the ace of the team. He's the superstar player. But Zoms is the glue of the team, and he has improved so much just from the first Ignition Series now. It's light years ahead. He's also a player where he gets better every tournament, which has scared some of these people.
All this while preparing for a fight with Sabrosa. That's very impressive. Very, very impressive.
All the multitasking.
I was going to say, by the way, Tills is the first team to move into a town house also of all our teams.
There you go.
They all live not too far from me here in Austin.
Nice.
Zoms is already here because it's the original Sentinels Apex house, and he was part of the Sentinels Apex team. But Sick and Shazam moved here about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and Dapper had moved before that, and Sinatra moved and he left the Shock. So they're all here. They're all in a house. We'll see how that goes.
Very, very quick because we're running out of time here. This is the one category that we did differ on. Here's the board. Very quick. 1 sentence or less. Why did you pick this player and why? Jacob, let's start with you.
And I wanted to clarify because we did an Overwatch column this morning where we talked about like who we picked for MVPs. If you would have asked who the MVP was, I would say Tins because Tins contributes the most to his team out of everyone. Right? Like, he is the most valuable player to his team. I do not think Tins is the best player. I think that Sinatra is the best player from a skill perspective. But I think if compared to his teammates, Tins would be my MVP. So those are 2 different things for me. I would say MVP is Tins. Best player is Sinatra from a skill perspective.
Tyler? We both picked Tins.
Yeah, I agree with Jacob's sentiments. I would flip that. I would say Sinatra is the MVP of Sentinels by how he sets the tempo for the team. He sets the precedent for the team. His aggression and his ability to grab first blood is like no other right now. And when champions like on Phoenix, the way he can make teams feel so uncomfortable on Sova, where he's ulting at the start of rounds and just hit his blind shots. Like, there's no other player like Sinatra right now where he knows how to get the maximum of all of his abilities. But with Tens, I just think he's flat out the best player. He just does things that no other player in Valorant can. Mixwell's up there. Sinatra's obviously up there. Wardell. But it doesn't matter if it's a judge. It doesn't matter if it's rifle. It doesn't matter if it's operator. The man does things that no one else can, where he can 1v5 around. There's been times where Cloud9 have looked very, very sluggish, where they're not doing anything, and it really has come down to the tens to make some magic happen. And that's why I call him a magician, because he pulls rabbits out of his hat every single tournament he did with Cloud9. So he led average combat score in all 4 tournaments. And while ACS isn't everything, that's a dang fine honor to have, is that he led the ACS in all 4 tournaments, and that's why I went to tens.
There's a quote, and I'm butchering it, and I apologize. If you're good, you'll tell everybody. If you're great, they'll tell you. And if you ask anybody in the competitive scene, they will say that Tens is not only the best player out there, but even when he entry frags, it's impossible not to disallow him his first frag. He just, you know it's coming. The best you can do is contain him and go 1-for-1, which is a good round. And that's really the best thing you can say about 10 and how he played during the initiacies. That'll do it for us here. Good vibes, acts of kindness, everybody. We're going to go a little bit of a hiatus with this program, but we will be back when the next series. So we will still be covering news and Valorant and everything. So don't worry, the show is not going away permanently or anything, but definitely as we get towards the next series of events, you can definitely look forward to the show and continue coverage at espn.com/esports. So in the meantime, in between time, we'll see you next time.